Alrighty, everyone, with the Galactic Championship wrapping up last weekend, well, a lot of people have been calling for certain suspensions on some certain cards. Obviously, the number one being Force Throw, which we got to dive into immediately. But there's also some other cards that people have been kind of talking about, and we're going to have to see as the meta develops, which is kind of what this video is here to talk about. What are we going to be looking for? What are the things that FG is going to be looking for before they actually make the final decision to chop Force Throw or any other cards on the talk about list for suspension? A big thank you to my patrons. We've been chatting about Force Throw and a bunch of other cards that are looking to potentially get banned here on the patron Discord, which, well, I think we're all in pretty much consensus. But as we dive into the video, the first card we absolutely have to mention is Force Throw. I've already talked about it numerous times in many videos. We have talked about it before the Galactic Championship, and we've talked about it after the Galactic Championship, and FFG has talked about it before and after themselves. Now, first things first, is FFG going to be banning any cards very soon? No. They've already mentioned on Twitter, I think it was Tyler, someone in my Patreon Discord had sent me the screenshot, but they said that they are heading to Gen Con and they are going to be waiting for some of the data from the planetary qualifiers. They're just not in office, and they're going to be waiting for data from the planetary qualifiers and sector qualifiers and regional qualifiers, basically for the meta to develop, because Galactic Championship was really the first major tournament. And while the major tournament, if you were just take that data, I think that they would ban Force Throw. We have to wait and see for the rest of the games to be played. There's a couple reasons as to why Force Throw was on the list for an immediate look at potentially suspension. The first thing is that it's a one resource event. The fact that it's a one resource event completely changes every single turn, no matter what, because there's so many different opportunities to not only, play Force Throw while playing other cards, but also to potentially play multiple Force Throws to completely dominate the board in a single turn. It also attacks your opponent's hand. It also prevents certain, kind of dynamics that Star Wars Unlimited really appreciates, like the deploying of leaders from happening, because it can deal up to, 9-10 damage with a single Force Throw. And it might seem like, well, isn't that uncommon? No, not at all. In a lot of matchups, when you're playing like Han Blue, for example, you can just Force Throw your Crate Dragons or Luke Skywalkers or your big units to just knock out leaders as they deploy, which is an incredibly powerful play. And it's not just Han Blue. If you look at the top 8 of the Galactic Championship, 6 of the 8 decks, Kylo Ren, Towson Red, Han Blue, all playing Force Throw, and not just playing it, but some of the critical components of their deck, especially Towson Red and especially Kylo Ren. Force Throw is a critical component for their early game kind of disruption and domination. Now, yes, it's still amazing in Han Blue, don't get me wrong, but overall, Force Throw just kind of goes against some of the play patterns that FFG really has mentioned that they really appreciate, which is more of a back and forth, action-based game that is more mid-range in style. And Force Throw really does disrupt that, not only by just preventing people from taking their actions by getting their units killed immediately. I think interaction heavy formats in general is something that FFG is trying to avoid. That's why control decks are not something that they want to see. And Force Throw is a very cheap interaction piece that allows you to really dominate the board. And like I said earlier, up against certain decks, like for example, Han 1, which is one of the reasons why we haven't seen Han 1, Force Throw is so dominant in that not only is it able to kill a bunch of things, but it also attacks your opponent's hand in some situations. That is also a whole nother dynamic that FFG has been kind of leery of. And on that note, Force Throw, by the way, before we move on to the next card, is by far the most likely card to get suspended. And I think on realistic options, I think Force Throw is the card that is going to get suspended, just because people are kind of sick of seeing it. And we've seen FFG respond to community feedback. It's just not a play pattern that FFG at least has alluded to wanting in their game. When they spoke about Boba being banned, Triple Dark Raid, DJ, and Django, this is kind of going into the realm of really preventing your opponent from playing Star Wars Unlimited. And that's one of the reasons why they don't want control decks in the game. And as I said, on that note, Force Lightning. This is another card that FFG, wow, I cannot type today. Oh my gosh. Force Lightning is another card that they mentioned in their stream before the Galactic Championship that they're going to be looking at. This is another very cheap interaction piece that does disrupt natural play patterns that we've had in the game for a while. Now, here's the thing with this. I know Force Throw is very, very strong. Force Lightning is also very strong, but not as strong as Force Throw typically is. But it does things that people really, really hate. Things like you play a Super Laser Technician, and now it does nothing and it dies. You play your leader, and you just get Force Lightning out of the game, and then can follow up with a Force Throw after the fact because of how efficient this removal effect is as well. All the when defeated triggers and abilities in general, you can't even play around them because this disables them. This is a very strong event. Now, it's less played than Force Throw because it is a villainy card, but not all that much so. It's not as strong in Han Blue, but most Han Blue players are playing 1 to 2 copies of them to get the double trigger off of Anakin for having a villainy and heroism card in their discard pile. So even though Force Throw is the neutral aspect, Force Lightning and villainy, you're still playing Force Lightning for 3 resources in your Han Blue deck and happy with it. 5 resources deal 4 damage and disable abilities is still good. And when you get to the late game, it is still a Rival's Fall effect. On 6 resources, deal 6 damage. 7 resources, 8 damage. That's enough to go ahead and finish off units in most situations. And that's the problem with Force Lightning. Again, very cheap interaction. If you consider Kylo Ren, the Carly Tarkin Town, or Towson Ren, both of them have so many ways to disrupt your early game units that it makes it really tricky for people to even play their units and get down on the board. And this is not something that's like, oh, well, don't they have to spend their entire turn doing it? No. You could easily go like turn 1, play a Force unit and Force Throw you, kill your unit. Turn 2, play Force Lightning for 3 resources, kill something for 4 damage, and potentially prevent their death triggers. But then on like turn 3 or 4, you could easily spend like 3 resources or 4 resources and still be left with 1 resource to combo with something else in your hand. So I do think this is another card that isn't too unlikely to get banned. This is another card that people have been talking about, not just FFG, as one that maybe should be looked at. And again, the reason why I mention especially Force Throw and Force Lightning is because they are very cheap interaction events that disrupt you from playing Star Wars Unlimited. Now, I know they don't want to get rid of all interaction entirely, but if you look at what the game has come from early sets, like set 1 and set 2 are very heavy on interaction. As we've gotten deeper and deeper into the game, we don't see events like Overwhelming Barrage or Power of the Dark Side or Force Lightning or Force Throw. Guess what all those cards came from? Set 1. Set 1 are all those cards. And that's crazy to think about. And if you look at Fell the Dragon, Rival's Fall, guess what? That's set 2. So set 1 and set 2 are basically responsible for the vast majority of interaction in the game. And FFG really isn't a huge fan. Even cards like Anakin or Luke Skywalker and Avenger are from set 1 as well. It's crazy how powerful set 1 was, by the way. But in general, this type of killing your units and not using unit combat and not being able to deploy your leader and not being able to do all these things is something that FFG has been trying to steer away from because they want to be reinforcing this back and forth action kind of game. And if you're playing a leader and it's getting immediately killed, it kind of goes against that plan. I know that's technically, well, you played an action, then your opponent played an action, but they just want to be able to be able to play these more leader unit focused decks. They want to be able to get deeper into the game. They want to be able to have people play out their units and actually be able to attack with them, or at least get into unit combat. So I could definitely see Force Lightning getting to the chopping block. They may start with Force Throw and then see where the decks end up, and they may decide about Force Lightning later. The other 2 cards that I've seen people talk about is Han Solo as the first one here, and that's the leader variant, the set 2 leader variant. If you look at the meta percentage from the Galactic Championship, Han was definitely over 20% of the meta. And if you look back on previous iterations where they are banning leaders or banning cards from the leaders' decks, over 20% was kind of a hallmark for concern. And I do think Han 2 has reached that point in terms of stats, but I actually don't think this is one that will be banned, or is very likely. I know some people are sick of seeing this card, but if you look at the conversion rate and the actual performance of Han Blue, while it did do well, no doubt about it, it is still a very strong deck. I don't think it's 20% of the meta worthy. And we'll see as we get more planetary qualifiers, which is one of the reasons why we are waiting for them, because the data really hasn't, I guess, extrapolated all that much yet, just because the format was so new when the Galactic Championship came out. So I don't think Han is really on the chopping block at all. I really think it's going to come down to some of the Force events. The other card that I think people are looking at is actually Kylo Ren, which is a little bit surprising. I don't think this one's going to get banned just because it's the set 5 leader, and they're probably not going to ban one of their brand new leaders. But this deck with Kylo Ren and Tarkin Town especially is extremely impressive. Talk about lists combining all of the elements that we just mentioned and then putting it into one deck. That is Kylo Ren. Now, there is a kind of a cool combo finish with the deck with Modi, and just deploying Kylo Ren in general is kind of a nice combo finish. It's not even a combo really, but you know, putting all the upgrades on Kylo Ren and then finishing out the game is cool. That is like a fun thing to do. But with the Migs Mayfeld and Force Throw and Force Lightning and Anakin and Power of the Dark Side, like every single thing that people don't like, Kylo Ren is really doing. It's a sweet list, in my opinion, but if you're playing against someone that's playing Kylo Tarkin Town and you're playing, let's say, Han Blue, your action becomes immediately worse because they got Tarkin Town. So Tarkin Town is killing your units. You got Force Throw to contend with. You got Force Lightning to contend with. You've got MiGs to contend with, if that's not just immediately killing all of your units. You got Power of the Dark Side to contend with. It is just a brutal deck to play against. And it completely dumps on some of the lists in the format. Like Vader Yellow is an example. If you start with MiGs, they don't really have typical answers to that card. Even if they have like a Waylay, that's turn 2 Waylay, and guess what? They could still play MiGs and trigger F twice by that point, knocking out a bunch of your space units. And if they have Sanctuary Shuttle, there's answers to that as well with, you know, Force Unit, Force Throw, or Force Lightning plus Target Town. There's just so many things that disrupt so many of the top decks that I think really they're going to be targeting the cards in the deck rather than Kylo Ren. It's one of the reasons why I think Force Lightning and Force Throw are going to be really heavily looked at, and the two most likely cards to be banned, to be honest. Force Throw, I'm pretty confident that they're going to at least take a look at it and talk about it. And I don't think it's going to be all that unlikely to see a ban from Force Throw, but it's going to be a little bit. Force Lightning, they may take the conservative approach of banning Force Throw first and seeing where the decks with Force Lightning end up, and then afterwards making more decisions as to whether they're about to ban Force Lightning. But I wouldn't be surprised they just go both out, because they kind of did something similar in the previous set where when they banned Django, they're like, yeah, we're going to ban Django, and we're going to ban Triple Dark Raid, or we're going to ban DJ all in one go. Because if Django gets banned and then Triple Dark Raid, other decks are good, or if DJ with Double Yellow Han comes back, we don't want to see those decks. It's not fun. And I could see them, you know, banning Force Lightning just because they don't want the interaction heavy meta to really dominate the game. And that's kind of what it's doing right now. Talzin Red, Han Blue, and Kylo Red are all interaction heavy, relatively heavy decks. If you look at previous metas, they weren't as interaction heavy as it is today. I guess you could argue that Target Town was pretty interaction heavy, but if you look at like the sets, yes, Fellow Dragons were played, yes, Power of the Dark Sides and Overwhelming Barrages were played, but now even the more aggro decks are playing Force Throws, Force Lightnings, all the good stuff that are really, really obnoxious to people. So we'll see, but I do think that it's at least going to be mentioned by FFG, and I do think Force Throw is probably on the chopping block. But the question is, do you all want it to be? And I guess that is really the final decision. If the community really calls for the Force Throw to be banned, which I think is totally reasonable, I do think it will open up some more portions of the meta. So I don't think it's actually bad for the overall health of the game. And I would be curious to see where the meta ends up. Then I think FFG will ban it if there's a huge community uproar. And I do see already people talking about, yeah, they probably should be banning Force Throw. So if that's the case, Force Throw is probably gone. If not, then we could have a full set 5 meta with just the same cards, and we'll see how that develops. If it develops into a very, very awkward situation where one deck's just completely dominating or one card is completely dominating, then yeah, maybe we'll see a change a couple months down the line into set 5. But I'm not too worried in that if the meta is not fun, like when Django was here, I don't think they're going to let it sit for that long, because FFG does take action so far. They've proven that they will. So fingers crossed that we're going to have an even more fun meta than before. I will say set 5 has been my favorite meta so far, just because of all the things that have been introduced, how strong the cards are, the force mechanic, this set has definitely impacted the overall meta the most out of any set so far, which is really, really awesome to see. So hopefully you all are enjoying the meta. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'm excited to hear your feedback, and I'll see you all for the next one.